Hello, welcome back to day 2. Yesterday we painted this tree, pine tree with snow. Today we're going to put it in a snow globe and paint this simple little snow globe with a pine tree. You can add more pine trees if you'd like. Make it your own, do it however you want. To get the snow globe shape, I used a a roll of tape and traced it just to get the basic shape for the snow globe. And then we kind of straighten out the edges here. Gave myself a couple little, just sketched some guidelines just to give us a little idea of the shape that we want this snow globe to take. I looked at a few pictures, but I'm kind of just making it up on my own as I go. One thing I noticed on this one, I kind of left it flat and it really should have been a little more rounded there, just to look like it's a round base and not something really, really weird and flat. So I'm fixing that here in this sketch here. Remember to sketch your thing very lightly. I'm actually gonna sketch a very light, kind of just a hill of where the base will be, just so I remember. You don't have to do that. I'm even gonna lighten it just a touch so I know that it's there, but I'm using my kneaded eraser to lighten up some of my sketch lines. I want it to be light enough that I can see the pencil lines, but that it won't show up when I paint, because that's just not the effect I'm going for. There is an effect, you can do a ink and wash type of painting where you paint and then you trace your outlines with a pen, something like that. And that is a good, fun style to do as well, and if that's something you like, then feel free to do that. But I don't want my pencil lines to show as much as possible, but I do want you guys to be able to see what I'm doing, so we'll leave a little bit there. Okay, so one thing I'm going to do first, I think, is I'm going to go ahead and do the background of the snow globe. You can do it either way. When I first painted this, I actually painted the tree first, and then I did the background. But when it's a light background like this, it's actually a little bit easier if you do the background first. If we were doing like a really, really dark blue background, we'd want to do the tree first and then do the background and then just avoid the tree area when we're painting the background. But since it's a lighter background, we can go ahead and do that first. We'll just have to let it dry a bit before we work on the tree so it doesn't blend out. So for the tree, I did a really, really light wash. This is a Pthalo blue, really, really light, mostly water. Mine, I think, actually probably had a touch of green in it. And I kind of like how that looks. So I'm adding just a tiny bit of green into here. I want it mostly water. It's going to be very, very light. And then I'm going to paint kind of along just the edges of the thing. You want to leave some white space, especially a curved kind of white line there. And over here as well, just to kind of be the reflection. Because the glass is reflecting, we would have some white areas. We can add them in again later as well with bleed-proof white, sorry, if we have to. I'm also avoiding that area I drew at the beginning, my little hill of snow, if you will. It got a little bit dark in areas, so I'm going through and I'm wetting my brush and kind of lifting some of that paint before it dries. I wanted it to be a very, very light blue with those little white spaces there. Okay. So once we have that down, sorry, we can work on the base of the snow globe, since it doesn't really touch the background too terribly much, since we've got the white snowy hill area there in the middle. So I'm going to mix together a brown. I'm using my Winsor Sepia and some Mission Gold Burnt Sienna here to get a nice warm brown. I want it to look like a wooden base. You can make it whatever color you want. I've seen snow globes that have different types of bases. You can, it's your snow globe. You can make it however you want. I'm just going for kind of a wooden base for some reason. It's what I felt like painting today. And well, the other day when I painted the original one. Okay. And then I'm going to extend to here as well. And remember, I mentioned I made it a more rounded base so that it gives that 3D curved edge look. All right, we're just filling that space, and we can add some shadow and other details in a bit. And see, I'm actually extending it too much, and I'm making my base way too big. You play with it too much sometimes, it really messes up. Okay, and one thing I am going to do is get a little more sepia. I don't think I did it on this specific drawing, but I am going to go a little darker right here at the base of where the snow globe is, just because that would have some more shadow there. And I'm also going to add just a touch of shadow here where the snow globe kind of goes in. Create that little crease or crevice there. Okay. Something else we can do is I added a little bit of a shadow underneath my snow globe, and you can kind of touch the edges of the snow globe and just kind of spread it out a bit. I want the edges to be a little rough. And that just gives, we're having the light kind of come from this direction, and so that just gives us a little bit of grounding with the snow globe so it doesn't look like it's just floating in the air. And again, go a little bit darker right at the base of the snow globe. And we'll touch that up some more when it's dry, because the wet on wet is making it disperse more. But it's a good first step. Sorry, I want to make sure the whole picture is in my view here. Okay, so that is all we can do right now while we wait for this to dry. So we're just gonna pause, come back in a moment when we think it's dry, take a minute. I tend to work on multiple paintings at once, so normally if I'm painting, I would pause here and start working on another painting before I come back to this one when it's dry. So if that's something that interests you, you can go ahead and do that. Pause, check out another video from either, I only have two, so another artist, or, do some household chores, do, something to pass the time for a minute until it's dry. You also can use a like craft heat tool to kind of speed up the drying process. I don't really do that all that often unless really necessary, if I'm on a time crunch and I really need to get something done. I don't know why, I just prefer to let them dry naturally. But I wouldn't recommend a blow dryer because they blow air at a higher force, and it can spread your paint more and can also damage your paper if you're not careful. But I have this the Ranger Heat It Craft tool. It's fairly affordable, and I use it when I need to speed up the drying process. But I'm going to go ahead and pause the video real quick, let mine dry a bit. I will be right back, and we'll move on to the next step. Okay, we are back, and this is fairly dry. Dry enough. There's no sheen to it or anything, so it doesn't look wet. There's no pools of water, which is good. I mean, we didn't really use a whole lot of water, so that's not surprising. So we're going to go ahead and go to our tree. Now, if you were here yesterday, you were here when I painted the tree. If not, I have a little, mini tutorial on the tree, but you're gonna see it here. We can basically go through the details. So I'm using my greens, my Undersea green and my Perylene green. I'm mixing them up just to make sure they're still wet. And we're gonna get started. And just like we did yesterday, I'm just gonna do a line down the middle. I don't wanna be too close to the top of the snow globe. I'm gonna go down to where the base of my little snow pile I created was. It's okay if it's not a straight line, but it's really just giving you a guideline of where your tree is. And then we're gonna start with the little hash marks on either side of this line. This tree is a bit smaller than the one we did yesterday because it's in the middle of a snow globe, and so we gotta be careful with our little marks. This is where that fine liner brush is very helpful to do the fine marks. It's okay if some stick out. Remember to skip some areas, leave some white spaces. We can add snow at the end with a bleed-proof white like we did yesterday. And we're going to splatter some snow today too with the bleed-proof white since it's a snow globe. And again, your tree doesn't need to be symmetrical. You just want the branches to progressively get longer at the bottom. How full you make it is up to you. It's your tree. I just kind of fill it in. I try to start a little bit lighter, and I try to start a little less full so that I can add more as we go if necessary. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's usually the plan I have in mind when I start. And now we're getting here to the bottom, and we're going to kind of go out in front a little bit, make it look rounded at the bottom so our tree doesn't look flat. It's not exactly centered in there, but that is okay. Could even maybe add another second one there if we really wanted to. Okay, so that's my basic tree. I'm gonna grab some more of the Perylene green and add just a few little areas, especially on the bottoms of branches and in the center of some darker color to be shadows. Especially down near the base of the tree, it's usually a lot more shadowed down there. And I'm gonna pull some of this dark color in a bit to do the shadow around the tree. But I want to get all my branches in here first. Okay, make sure we leave some of the lighter color in there. We don't want it to be so dark. Sorry, I gotta keep an eye on my camera and make sure I'm not pulling it out of the view. Okay, so we have some of that shadow color that we added in there before. I'm gonna grab a tiny bit more of the just sepia mixed with some green. Makes it kind of, grayish. Actually, if we use blue, use my indigo, that'll make it a little more almost gray. Okay, and so I'm just gonna put a tiny bit at the base of the tree. Wet my brush. Get most of that paint off, and I'm just going to pull some of that color out to be my shadow on the snow here. And we're going to kind of create the snow pile here by just bringing in some more of that shadow along the edges. And just creating little pockets of shadows in the snow. Okay, so there we go. It's the base of our tree. We've got our shadows. We've got all the other stuff on there. Our next big step would be to do the branches, like the snow on the branches, which we're gonna do because it is a snow globe and we're gonna have snow in it. I want it to look like there's some snow landing on the branches. So just like we did yesterday, in day 1. We're gonna grab some bleed-proof white. We didn't use a whole lot of water in our tree, or at least I didn't. If yours is a little more wet, you might want to wait, let it dry a little bit more. But if it's fairly dry, you can go ahead and get a little bit of the bleed-proof white and start adding it on some of these branches here. Remember to do the edges. You want to get a little bit kind of in the middle too on occasion to look like it's on the front of the tree. If we just do the sides, then it looks like our tree is flat. You can leave some of the branches kind of sticking up around it. Then it looks like the snow is covering some branches, but then some of the branches are sticking up in between the snow. Okay. Okay, so we've got our snow on our tree. The next big thing we want to do, and the final step really, is we can use the white to touch up any of our reflections if we covered them too much, but we can also do the splatter for the snow, which, because our background is still fairly light, it's not going to show up as well as it would on a dark background, but it should still show up fairly well. Now, again, because it's a white background, it won't matter as much, but a good practice to get in the habit of doing is covering the areas that you are splattering around. So like, we don't want the splatter to get on the base of our snow globe. We don't want it to get on the background around the snow globe. We want the snow to stay within the snow globe. And so I've got these little pieces of paper. They're just little extra bits of paper that I have from other paintings I've done. And I'm just going to kind of cover as much of the background around the snow globe as I can. You could even cut them to be more, whatever. You could use paper towel. Paper towel does absorb a bit more, so just be very careful where you're putting it. The other thing to do is make sure that the area around your space is clear. I have my iPad set up here off to the side, and if I don't put it away or cover it, I do tend to get paint splattered on it often. So just something to be aware of. We're going to use our bleed-proof white again. We're going to get our brush nice and wet. Pick up some of that paint, a good bit of it. We're going to tap it into the paint one more time just to make sure it's nice and wet. I'm going to use another paintbrush to just tap it on, and we're just going to tap our brush. The bigger your paintbrush, the bigger the splatters will be. Sorry, it gets a little bit more. So this is a small painting, small brush, which I am using because I don't want my snowflakes to be huge. If you're doing a bigger painting, you might want to use a bigger brush for your splatter. Just all things to consider. It's kind of hard to see, but there is a good bit of splatter on there. I also am getting probably some on this painting next to me. I'm not super worried about it because it was just an extra, but that's why we've got to make sure we clear our area. Okay. So now that that is done, you can let it dry for a bit before you lift up the paper, because if you're not careful and you bump the paper into the wet paint, it could spread your paint around. I'm going to be very careful, and also I don't mind. I can show you what it looks like if it happens. But the background on this is light enough that it shouldn't matter too terribly much. And I can actually see some areas that are still wet from when we did our branches on our tree. So I'm just going to be very careful. And let's see. Can you guys see that pretty well? It's a little hard to see the snow. And actually, if you wanted to add more detailed snow, you can just tap it in. You can wet your brush, maybe tap it off. You want to make sure there's not too much, and you can just add in a few little snowflakes in there. Just be careful, because your brain will try to make patterns. and you don't want to have too many bits too close to others, but it is, if you don't want to splatter, or if you splatter and you don't like it, you want to have a few bigger snowflakes, you can definitely go in and just add a few snowflakes like that. The other thing I'm going to do is use that bleed proof white and kind of highlight my highlights that they don't stick out as well. The white paint does make them more noticeable than just the white paper. And so if you really want to highlight those, or even if you want to add in a few extra that didn't, in some spots, really highlight the glass, you can add those in too with the bleed proof white. Okay. All right, so there it is. If you wanted to, I know we mentioned before that we could darken the base of our snow globe a bit because it got it blended out a bit. So you could go through and darken that up a little bit if you wanted to. Reshape it a bit as well. Maybe get a little bit kind of in here. We could even add more of a shadow off to the side, since the light is coming from here, casting a shadow, then we might have like a little more shadow on this side. And so that's something you can add in to make it a little more realistic, but it's not necessary. I think it pretty much got the point across before without adding that in. But I will take my brush and kind of spread that paint out a bit. Okay, but there we go. So let me know what you think, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for another painting. Thanks. Bye, y'all.